Johnson, and this is focused on Liberia. Hit it! From Cape Mount to Cape Palmas, mountain back to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Bokonjre, to educate, elevate, and promote. Yeah, focus on Liberia. For Liberia, Liberia. For Liberia, yeah, 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 yeah. From Monday to Sunday. From Monday to Sunday. It's focused on Liberia. Talk about home affairs. Hey. In diaspora. Current affairs. Reliable information. History. Talking about culture. Politics. Education. Entertainment. Business. Sports. Advertisement. Articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday. Focus on.
Good evening, and welcome to Roundtable Africa. Tonight, we turn our attention to a country often described in academic and policy cycles as one of the continent's most stable democracies. That's Botswana. Since independence in 1966, Botswana has been cited by researchers, governance institutions, and international observers for its consistent elections, strong rule of law, culture, and relatively low levels of corruption compared to many states in the region. But behind the praise are deeper questions. What explains Botswana's democratic resilience? What lessons, if any, can other African countries draw from its experience? And is Botswana's democracy as strong as it appears, or are there underlying tensions that deserve scrutiny? Tonight, we explore Botswana not as a model to copy blindly, but as a case study that helps us think critically about democracy in Africa, its possibilities, its limits, and its future. We are joined by the presenter, Mohamed Sherif. He is FOL political analyst, a product of Waplo Institute, all the way from Kilipo in Rivergy County. Mr. Sherif, a
Yes.
student of history as well. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan. It's great to be here. And thank you, Jimmy, as well for being here.
And thank you, Jimmy. We are also joined by our diplomatic analyst who is in the nation's capital. When you are at the nation's capital, you're close to power. Mr. Jimmy Eastman is just from a vacation in Rio de Janeiro. Welcome, sir.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be back, especially, so we can at least enlighten our brothers and sisters about things that we could do to be successful. So it's a pleasure, and I'm honored to be back.
Thank you. Again, I want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. We've been looking at democracy in Africa. Tonight, our attention is to Botswana. And let me welcome Mr. Sherif.
Yes, Dennis, thank you very much. In the lead up, you mentioned that we've been looking at democracies in Africa, and that is exactly what we've been doing for the last several months. We've looked at Tanzania, we've looked at Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Cape Verde, Uganda, and Mauritius. And tonight, we're looking at Botswana. Botswana is a shining example of one of the best democracies in Africa. So when we talk about Botswana, you hardly hear of this country, and that is a good thing. Anytime that you're not hearing about an African country, anytime you're not hearing that they're in the news, the BBC, the Voice of America, international news agencies or local news agencies, or journals, newspapers and stuff like that. Anytime these countries are not mentioned in traditional media or new media for that matter, then to me, I feel like all is well. And Botswana is quiet. It's in southern Africa, and you hardly hear of Botswana. So as you stated in the intro, we're using Botswana, looking at Botswana as a case study, as an example of what is possible, as an example of what countries like Liberia can do in order to improve not just our democracy, but the lives of the Liberian people.
Thank you. And Jimmy, let me welcome you also. I wouldn't be surprised if you even visited Botswana.
That's the next trip. I plan to go to South Africa,
Oh,
and Botswana will definitely be on that list. Yeah, we can be proud of Botswana, but when we think about why are they on the right trajectory, and you'll find out, we'll be discussing soon, that the leader they had, Kama, what his name is, Setsi, it's hard to pronounce his first name.
Kama.
Yes, Seresi Kama. He put the country on the right trajectory. He, instead of looking to build wealth for himself and his tribe, no, he was all about it being for the country. And so they built strong institutions. They used their resources wisely by investing in education systems, financial reserves. So the country took a different trajectory. And a long time ago, when did they get independence? In the 60s? Just a few years ago, they were considered a poor country. But the judicious use of resources have propelled them to a mid-income nation today. Why can't we can do the same? But we have to divorce ourselves from this myopic, me and my family first vision. We have to look at the country and do what is good for everybody. This thing, that's the only way we'll get that country moving the way it should be moving.
Thank you. Let's begin our presentation tonight with Botswana. Mr. Sherif.
Yeah, so let's look at the map, which is where I like to go first. When you look at this map, this is the totality, the compendium of African states, African countries. And this is from North Africa to Southern Africa, from East Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, all in between. Down in the south, in the blue circle, right above the Republic of South Africa is Botswana, and the capital is Gaborone. Botswana is in Southern Africa. It is a very important country because it has a stable democracy. The democracy in Botswana has subsisted for, over 50 years, make that 56, 57 perhaps, since 1966. Botswana has had free and fair elections. There hasn't been any trouble in Botswana. Democracy in Botswana has, for the most part, elections have been won by one party until recently. So the Botswana Democratic Party lost for the first time since 1966. Jimmy mentioned Sir Seresi Khama, who was the independent leader of Botswana, and he actually laid the groundwork for Botswana's economic growth and political stability. He was an unselfish leader, and he drove Botswana's post-independent democracy, the government that came out of an agreement with the British. So Botswana didn't really fight any wars to gain their independence like in some other African countries. Um, the map of Botswana. So, I go back to the map again. So, you look at specifically, this is a map of Botswana, and I'll come back to Kama in a few minutes, so Seresti Kama in a few minutes. But when you look at the map of Botswana, this is a massive country. It's over 200,000 square miles. What is Liberia? 43,000 square miles. The problem with Botswana, though, is that a lot of this land mass is covered by the Kalahari Desert. So 70% of the land mass of Botswana is covered by this Kalahari Desert. The Kalahari is not really, technically is not a desert because it has fertile areas. It gets rainfall, and so there's grass so grass can grow in certain parts of the Kalahari Desert. There's also wildlife, so it sustains those, it sustains wildlife and grass and stuff like that. So therefore, it is considered more of a savanna. So it's a semi-desert, but it is massive. It cuts across large portions of Botswana, some parts of Namibia, and South Africa. So this is the desert that's that cover most of Botswana. So you have a small area. So how do you have this massive country with just 2.5 million people? Because of this semi-desert called the Kalahari Desert. So it is also a blessing to have the Kalahari because it has one of the largest game reserves. And also diamond was found in the 1960s in the Kalahari Desert. And ever since then, Botswana's economy has never been the same. It's always, upward trajectory. Something Jimmy mentioned is that, once they found this diamond, Seresi Kama, from what I read or research about him, this diamond rich area was in his area. Imagine this, Dennis. So this was found in his part of, the country the part of the country where he was from. But the culture and the politics that Seresi Kama preached was unity and togetherness. So even though this is from this part of the country, but the revenue and resources from diamond that the country extracted at this time was going to benefit the entire country. So it's not just, okay, we have the Pudu Mountain and it's going to benefit the people of Pudu or Grand Jide. This is going to benefit everybody. Now, look, when you go to going back to Liberia, when you have these natural resources, it's not really benefiting the people. Okay, let's get that clear. It's the authorities, the governmental authorities. So just to be clear, in the case of Botswana, Seresi Kama decided that the people will benefit. So therefore, Dennis, some of the videos that we will hopefully show tonight, you have tremendous infrastructure. And my research led me to something that Abby Tyler would love. The government spent about 70% on healthcare, healthcare for the citizens. So there's universal healthcare for the people of Botswana. We're going to get to that. There's, clinics accessible to people. 95% of the people, there's clinics available within a 5-mile radius to 95% of the people of Botswana. So there's no need to, take someone on a wheelbarrow for a long ride across country where you don't have vehicles like in some parts of West Africa. And Botswana has the facilities. The government has deliberately invested in healthcare, and I know Abby Tyler would love this.
And Mr. Sherif, you mentioned Putu Mountains, right?
Yes.
So right now in Grand Jide, Putu Mountain is in Grand Jide.
Yes.
And in Grand Jide, you have the Putu people who are Sapo. So now there's a tension there because they say, hey, this mountain is in Grand Jide. Why is it called Putu Mountain? It should be called Jide Mountain. And so this is it's a fight right now going on.
Oh
So
my
you're
God.
talking about the president who said this is in my area, but we all can share in it. Even
Yes.
the name. What if that mountain was or let's say Loma Mountain, and you say, oh no
Yes.
no, you can't be Loma Mountain because you are in
Um,
Grand Jide. But
Unbelievable.
I want us to from the videos so that people have an idea even before we go there. Let's look at the capital city of Botswana, Gaborone, and see what it looks like,
Yes.
because so that we can get an idea of what we're talking about here. So I'm going to in a minute, Chrome tab, show, yeah. Let me go to, and I'm just look at it without sound. Is that's intentional.
Okay. That's fine.
We're taking a look at the capital city of Botswana.
All right.
Jimmy, this is somewhere, you start marking the area already because you go in there.
Is it out yet? I don't see it.
Okay, I'm coming. Why would it not be out? Hmm. That's just is playing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now it is.
All right. I want to see some of the beautiful.
So this is the capital, Habarani. Yes.
Let's explore in detail Gaborone City from the city center, malls, markets, bus terminals, neighborhoods, roads, and accommodations. We will walk and drive around the city to feel the city. Gaborone is the capital and the largest city in Botswana with a population of over 300,000 people, about 10% of Botswana's population. But the city's metro area has over 600,000 people. This city was named after Chief Gaborone of the Dropa people who once controlled land nearby, and because it was not affiliated with any specific indigenous group and was close to fresh water, the city was planned to be the capital in the mid-1960s when the Bechuanaland Protectorate became an independent nation. Gaborone is the political and economic capital of Botswana, home of its largest companies and the Botswana's stock exchange. It also serves as headquarters of Southern African Development Community, SADC. Message toward today, we start from new feet.
All right, you got the point.
And because it's Sunday, the city is less busy, and hence it's the perfect time to explore infrastructure of the city. Let's walk.
All right, Mr. Sherif. I
Yeah.
just trying to get people the idea what we're talking about here, even before we go into it.
Yeah. So as you can see, the government has been very deliberate in terms of spending on infrastructure development. The resources that's generated from the diamond trade. The government has made a deliberate effort to respond to the needs of the citizens. So this is a country that gained independence in 1966, and the country was poor. So from the very start, Botswana was a poor country, and so following the discovery of diamonds, the government knew that it has to make some choices. There were priorities. So there were, for example, 22 college graduates when Botswana gained independence. There was 100 high school graduates, and that was it. And so today, that's a country of 88% literacy rate, and a country that's spending 70% of its 70% revenue on healthcare. Total healthcare expenditure is 70%, and the remainder is funded by either donors or private insurers. So if you have a private insurance company, you work and you have a private insurance company, you do co-payments and all these, premium payments and all these different things, but the government still comes in to assist the citizenry. And so therefore the people are happy. When the people are happy, the people live a little longer. People have clean environment, which the video that showed. So one of the things that I found was that the Harvard International Review said Botswana is a leader of democracy in Africa. So I asked myself the question, in doing these presentations, I don't just this is not just a presentation that's done out of the blues. It's for a purpose. It's a deliberative purpose. So we're not sitting here as focused on Liberia to just bring something that doesn't make any sense. The purpose of this, we're looking at an African country, a country in Africa that at the vortex of of the Cold War, that was able to escape those tensions to become a shining example in Africa. How did they do that? And Jimmy spoke to some of those points, some of those salient issues that Jimmy outlined right there are some of the reasons why these countries that are stable, countries like Mauritius, countries like Botswana are stable. This is the reason why they're stable. The effort that the government makes has to be deliberate. It can't be capricious. You can't be all over the map, as they say in the United States. You have to be very deliberate in terms of what you're doing, in terms of service delivery. For example, healthcare. This is information that was very useful to me as well, to see that there is a government out there that's spending a lot of money on universal health care, and that country is in Africa. So, this is something to be proud of, even if you're not a citizen of Botswana. Another thing to be proud of, which we've covered, and we're going to cover this ad nauseum, is that the first president of Botswana actually said president. He set the president, President. He set the president for good leadership, democracy, and development. And so today, if we talk about Botswana, so Seresi Khama gets a lot of credit, and the people of Botswana get a lot of credit for following the democratic process. So
I'd like to add something there when you're done to that whole democratic process thing.
Yes, go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, okay. So here's the irony of it, Dennis. This man was elected when he got independence, 1966, and he was president up until 1980 when he died. Yet they said he had established a very stable democracy. Now, if you're the only president from one to the other, what are they looking at when they say it's a stable democracy? Well, what he did do, he built strong institutions and put the resources of the country back into the people. So I guess this multi-party thing is not what we really desire. We desire a government who would take our country's resources and improve the people's livelihood directly. What about one person? Because nowadays people talking about, just like Trouder the other day said, we don't need to be thinking about democracy right now. We need to be thinking about building the country. Just the other day. So it is more important that you have somebody who wants to develop the country rather than this so-called democracy that power changing hands. Because as we vie for power, it becomes a showmanship. It becomes a ethnic thing. It becomes something less where dignified people will not be elected. It's manipulated. So I think it's good to note that as much as they say he was the only one there, but it still said it's a stable democracy. I guess they're talking about the country was peaceful. What do you think? So Sherif.
Yes, the country is still peaceful since 1966. The hallmark of democracy, some of the hallmarks of democracy, some of the characteristics of democracy is not just election, holding election. Anybody can hold election, okay? Museveni is holding election. Paul Kagame is holding elections. Everybody is holding election all over the place. Ouattara is holding election. But some of the key characteristics of democracy is that, are these elections free and fair? Is it transparent enough where the opposition is able to agree with the result? They may say, well, there were some discrepancies here and there, but overall we agree with the outcome of the election. That's a hallmark of democracy. Another hallmark of democracy, a good democracy, is the independent media, the free and independent media. How the media institutions operate in a country of law, the rule of law. It's also, Mr. Boyka's favorite piece. The rule of law is a hallmark of democracy. Since the time of Sir Seresi Khama, Botswana has not had a political prison. That, not that I know of, that there has been a political prisoner in in Botswana. You can't say the same of our country, Liberia, because right now Prophet Key is languishing in jail. I mean, he's a political prisoner. So you have Botswana that respects the rule of law. The transparency in the rule of law. You also have in Botswana respect for the separation of powers. That is critical, a critical ingredient for any democracy, any good democracy. There has to be a separation between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. We saw the other day where the leadership in Monrovia, in Liberia, was able to manipulate the process of picking a new speaker. And so, when you talk about real democracy, good democracy, that's not the hallmark of a good democracy. A good democracy tends to separate, these powers, the check and balance. There's a reason why there's the judiciary, there is the executive, and the legislature, so that these branches are, counterbalancing one another. Because if you don't have that, then you have a dictatorship. In
I'd like to add something there. Especially on Sunday we can have what's that show called? Where we
On
on point, and we have our brother there, Tahu, who is talking about how this democratic system, the system we're talking about, doesn't work. There, remarkably, in Botswana, they have a traditional system called the Kigotla. I hope I'm not butchering that word, but a Kgotla, Kigotla. And this is where community assemblies where leaders consult citizens. So you have community leaders, but they consult citizens, and you create a culture of public accountability and consensus. This is what helped reinforce the democratic values even more, even than anything else in itself. So they effectively have using democracy, because just like the traditional thing we did before, the chief would consult the elders would consult the tribe, and everybody would have part of the decision making. So that strong traditional governance is what has helped Botswana be so stable and have this good democracy.
Yeah. And thank you, Jimmy. You brought up a very good point. And River Says Pro is asking, hey, Jimmy, what are you saying? Should we discourage democracy in Africa and go back to the days of TWP? I think one problem, and I've been saying this when it comes to our education, right? What democracy, for instance, is a means to something, right? So in a country, you want the people their livelihood to be better. You want to be equal distribution or equitable distribution of the nation's resources. You want people to be educated. You want people to be fair, right? So democracy is the means to that. it's not the end, it's not the ultimate. So if you can achieve those things through other means, it's almost like education. We go to school, the purpose of education, and I think we have not really defined or we have not really understood the purpose. The purpose of education is to solve the problem that we are facing. Yes. So if you're educated and cannot solve the problem, what good is that? So we have democracy, and it is not doing the things that democracy was set up to do. What's the use of it? Right now in the House, people are trying to say, well, this is democracy. You have the right to do X, Y, Z. So hey, Yeka Koluba, he talks too much. Let's find any reason so we can just kick him out. So we are using as if when we have democracy, it's like we have arrived. But that democracy is supposed to take us somewhere. Those of us in the church say the cross is not the place, it's not the it's only the means to the crown. Yeah. Don't get me preaching now, Mr. Sherif. So it is not, we just celebrated Easter. It's not about the suffering and everything, but where is the cross taking you? Is it taking you to the crown that was prepared for you in heaven? So we don't stop at democracy, and that's why we are so confused. We get democracy. We are just doing everything we want to do. We abuse it because democracy gives us the right to talk. So we insult. Democracy gives us the right to vote who we want to vote. So you can vote your grandfather, even though your grandfather cannot even walk. Oh, but that's democracy. No, the purpose of democracy is for us to get at this point, and we are not there. You are abusing democracy. That's not democracy. That's foolishness.
Yeah. Then we can move to the next slide. And then what I was going to add is that, vehicle is good. A car is good. A car by itself, when I was a child, a car didn't drive itself. Of course, they're trying to change that now where, you have, driverless vehicles, but still largely a car cannot drive itself. So democracy is like that vehicle. To me, you need a good driver. So, I won't be a passenger in a vehicle where the driver is disconcerted. The driver is distracted by other things, other issues. It's like our democracy in Liberia. We have these drivers that are very distracted. They're distracted by wealth. They're distracted by other issues of this world, material issues.
Right.
And therefore, they're driving the vehicle into the ditch, which is the country.
Right. And Mr. Sherif, you are right, because democracy is that vehicle. And for them, as long as they have the vehicle, they're done. We're good. Right. You can treat it any kind of way. You can drive it in a ditch. Don't wash it. Don't do anything.
Yeah.
We have the vehicle. We're good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's not so. You can abuse it, and it becomes a death trap.
Right.
Right. So Brother Rivers says pro. It's just having democracy. It's not if it's not effective, it's not doing you no good. Look beyond the words or the idea. Those don't romanticize ideals. What is working for your people is what you need. And if it's tyranny, but it's working for the people, like how Gaddafi was in Libya, if it's working for the people, then that's it. We have to be very careful about how we put things on a shelf and worship it. We, the people, we should be benefit from this. And if we're not being benefited from this system, something is wrong with it. Whether that True Party, whether that anybody else who could get their NDPL, don't matter. We supposed to benefit from it.
So on this outline, we're going to look at the geography of Botswana, the demographic composition, religion, national language, official language, the system of government, the economy, education, healthcare, and the rule of law. So that is our basic outline. And for Botswana was a British protectorate. So we're going to go to the 1800s, late 1800s. to the early 1900s. Colonial contacts with Botswana goes far back. But I just want to start from 1885, where the area was called Bechuanaland, and it was the Bechuanaland Protectorate. This area was and still is heavily inhabited by the Bantu-speaking people called the Swana. They moved here in some say that the 6th century. They've been there for a long time. There's also an indigenous group called the San people, SAN. They've been there for a long, long time. And so these people move into that area. And in 1885, the British took over as a protectorate. So Bechuanaland was a protectorate from 1885 to 1966. This is the abbreviated version. It's a long story. So the 1966, and there was no sort of independence war fought. Serasi Khama was the first president of Botswana, and he was agreeable to the British, which is why at some point, he also he ran into some trouble because he married a white woman, and they gave him a hard time, and they even expelled him from the country for that reason, because it was frowned upon. But somehow, he was a pragmatist, so he came back, and he had to relinquish his his entitlement to, because he came from a royal family traditionally, so he had to relinquish that. He didn't become a rebel. He didn't become this revolutionary that's going to come in and change everything around. So he was agreeable, and he was not seen as a threat. And so Botswana gained independence, if you will, on the silver platter. And so Botswana has had this long run of stability for a very long time. And so on September 30th, 1966, the Bechuanaland Protectorate gained independence as the Republic of Botswana. And the Botswana Democratic Party, which Mr. Khama established, became the ruling party. In Botswana, one of the things that we're going to get to, Dennis, you can bring that slide back up, please. One of the things that we're going to get into is how is the president selected or elected, right? So it's indirect election. So you elect members of parliament, who then in turn elect the president. So the president then turns around and appoint the vice president and appoint his cabinet. This is an executive presidency, so it's not like Mauritius. This is not like Cape Verde. You don't have a ceremonial president or a prime minister. This is a very powerful position. He's an executive president, but some way, somehow, even with the executive authority, these guys are ruling. These guys are running the country on the basis of the Constitution, the rule of law, and the administration of justice. You have to give the leadership of Botswana an A. If you're not going to give them an A+, you have to give them A, because these guys, they have all the powers, and yet they are abiding by the Constitution. Then is the results. When the results were announced, President Masisi conceded to this young politician, Boko. Boko now, who formed his party is the UDC party, the Umbrella for Democratic Change, defeated a 58-year-old party, and Masisi conceded immediately and congratulated the winner of the election. And Masisi welcomed Gideon Boko, to the presidential palace, and it was a very smooth transition. And so that's what they have in Botswana. I mean, for us, it might have been a different story, although Liberia has shown over the last couple of elections that we are also capable of accepting results. That I can say that Liberian leaders so far, from Ellen Johnson Sirleaf to now, to Weah, to Joseph Boakai, they have shown the proclivity to,
Swift resolution.
smooth it, ease out, get out of the way. So this is the new president of Botswana, Gideon Boko. Gideon Boko is it's a young guy. His party is called the UDC, the Umbrella for Democratic Change. So just before that, I like to go back to the composition of the country, if you don't mind, and we'll come to this. So in Botswana, you have the ethnic groups there. The Swana was 79% of the population, the Kalanga 11%, the San people who've been there for centuries, 3% of the population, others are 7%. This is a largely Christian country. Christianity is 79, about 80% of Botswana population are Christians. It's mostly Protestant Christians. No religion is 15.2%. The Bademo, this is a traditional religion, and it has 4.1% following. The national language, mostly is Swana, and the official language is English. And so, Botswana, the name Botswana is really the land of the Swana people. And so it's sort of like, the land of the Swana people. And it's Botswana, as I mentioned earlier, is in Southern Africa, and it has an area of 224,000 square miles. So it's massive. But most of that land mass is covered by the Kalahari Desert. The population is 2.5 million people. Gaborone is the capital. I mentioned landlocked initially, in our early discussion. This country is landlocked. When you talk about landlocked country, it's a country entirely surrounded by land. It has no direct access to an ocean or a sea. So Dennis, this country that's landlocked is prosperous. To me, when you have access to the Atlantic Ocean, you have access to see whatever. There's no excuse for you to be poor. Jimmy, look, we have access to
as a resource.
Right?
As a resource.
Exactly. Yeah. So why are we poor? Can somebody tell me why we're sitting here saying, "Oh well, Lord, we're not." From Robert Sports to Greenville to Harper, we are exposed to the mighty Atlantic Ocean, these pristine beaches. Liberia is a beautiful country, and we're not making use of this. You have a landlocked country in Botswana that's wealthy. And last, Jimmy, I'll let you come in. Last, I just
so the few key lessons, I see a lot of people commenting here. A few key things we can take from Botswana. Okay. First, they had honest early leadership. Like we were saying, Kama was an honest person who the resources that were there, he tended it for the people, he channeled it to the people. So that honesty was very significant. Strong institutions. We've been speaking about this. If you don't have strong institutions, you really have nothing. You cannot depend on people to do your bidding. It has to be institutionalized, that everybody, class after class after class, follow the same rules, follow the same ethics, and follow the same examples. You have to have strong institutions. The other thing they have was effective negotiation with multinational corporations. Now, the dama that they have, they effectively negotiate. They got 50% of that. How much can we say of the minerals resources that leave our country? How much percentage does Liberia get? How much do we get? You have to know how to negotiate for your benefit. Okay, somebody can you bribe the top man, he get his leg kicked, and the rest of the country suffers. So again, effective negotiation with multinational corporate, because they will eat your lunch if you give them the chance. The other thing they have is ethnic stability. You saw that it was not, it's 70 about 80% of one tribe, but even with the others, they still live together in peace. So that is important. And then political continuity. You don't want this political disruption. You want a continuous, and the only way you will have that continuity if the people you are electing are doing right for the people. Because if the people have no choice but to rebel, this is what sets country backwards. And the last thing, they have a cultural tradition of consultation. One reason where you know that you're doing the people's bidding is you consult them. What do y'all want? What y'all say we should do with these resources? What's the most important thing to y'all? All of y'all get together, all y'all make that decision. It's not a top down, it's about we, Ubuntu. That is how you have to govern people.
Yeah. Thank you, Jimmy. So I mentioned landlocked, and I'm going to come to the system of government. Landlocked countries. There are how many landlocked countries? From the brief research I did, I found 16 landlocked countries in Africa. Including Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and all these different countries.
Lesotho.
Lesotho and all. So there's 16 of them. Central African Republic, Cameroon. So there's 16 of them. Botswana is one of those, landlocked countries. So again, I go back to my point and what Jimmy is saying. Look, we have to be grateful to the Creator that we have access to the Atlantic Ocean. I continue to say it. I don't know how else to say this. So if you have access to the Atlantic Ocean, there's no reason why you should be poor, because that sea, that's what Ethiopia is fighting for right now. Ethiopia is trying to get some access through Eritrea to the sea. They're trying to force it, and it is conjecture in a lot of circles that Ethiopia is gearing up to fight for that access. They're trying to take military action. So something is going on there. So some people are trying to fight to get access to the sea. We already have those access from Roberts Sports to Greenville to Harper, but we're not making any use of them. We're allowing people to go and mine sand from these areas.
Let me throw in this little one, right? Because you talk about landlocked. We have the free port of Monrovia.
Yes.
There's a report now focused on Liberia that says between 2018 to 2023, guess how much the free port that collects everything, the gateway, contributed to the national treasury? 9 billion.
So in 2018,
from 2018 to 2023, 9 billion.
No,
this is like 1 week collection at the Freeport. Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe one day even, right? I mean, and this, it's inexcusable, Dennis. This is inexcusable, and this is why when we talk about these things, people should be. If I'm in government, really, if I'm a government advisor, I'll be looking at. I'll keep my ears to the ground. I'll be looking at these things. Hey, FOR is putting out this information. Maybe there's something. Our information right here could be used as a lead to get into a bigger issue, to solving a bigger issue, because this is serious. So we don't just come here. This is not arbitrary for me. This is serious stuff. I put a lot of work into this, okay? So it's not arbitrary. And I have expertise in this area. I study in this area. So I bring the credentials, and what have you. So it's not arbitrary. So when we come and give this information, it's very important. If government follows some of these prescriptions, believe me, life will be different.
Yes.
With us. So the system of government, we briefly talk about this. It's a parliamentary democracy, unicameral. And Jimmy, something I want to, get back to you on, like this whole unicameral thing, right? It's in countries like Cape Verde, and it's working. It's in Mauritius, and it's working. You know what they have? They have their legislatures is a lot smaller than ours. We have how many? We have 100 senators and tons of members of the House of Representatives.
73 and 30.
73 and 30. Like for what? You have one of the richest countries in Africa, in Botswana, that has only what, 69. It's
Yeah.
Unicamp. They have, that's it, 69. That's
We
it.
we have a bicameral system. You have the House and you have the Senate.
And it's
And
expensive. We can't afford that.
Yeah, do we need it?
We
We
need
just simply copied the format from the US.
Right.
Do we need it? We do not need, and in fact, they're creating another seat. The other day, they said they're going to get one more, one or two more senators. Why?
Right.
And mind you, if you bring this thing up for discussion, then they will shoot you down, because it's more about putting some money in somebody's pocket than it is about what the country actually needs.
Right.
And that is, yes, there's absolutely no need for poor Liberia to have all those many representatives and senators. They're not doing that. Half the time they do nothing. Every time they leave, we got to call them back and pay them to come back. They only work about 2-3 days in a week. But every time they go, we got to bring them back and pay them on top of it.
That's a lot of money.
They are exploiting us. And nobody will visit, because the people who have to make the changes are the people who are going to be directly affected by any change in these systems.
Yeah.
So it just perpetuates itself.
Think about the resources, right? The money, the wage, all the vehicles that we have to maintain.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cars and housing, their houses, electricity, everything that the state has to pay for.
The different staff people.
Okay.
The houseboy, the cook, the driver, everybody. Why?
Everything that we have to pay for as a state. If we do the unicameral system and cut it down, the leftover, the excess money from there will build schools in every county for the next, I don't know how many years. Okay, we'll build bridges. We'll build the road.
I told you about the teacher in Kwadu Bono, Wakanda. He killed himself because as educated as he is, he's making $20 Liberian from the community, not the government.
Oh my God!
It's shameful. He didn't have to live. Meanwhile, if we just cut the gasoline slip for 73 House of Representatives,
right?
We can pay the teachers.
Exactly.
And Saki didn't have to die. Go ahead.
No, he didn't have to die. He didn't have to die. And this is why I think, our examples, discussions, and the examples that we adduce in these discussions, that's why they're so important. They're important for reason of state management. Liberia is not been managed properly. So our problem is not the West. People are crying, oh, Mr. Trump cut, you said, why did Mr. Trump? No, I didn't have a problem with that. Okay. Because what that forces you to do now is to reevaluate your own strength and what you can do for yourselves. This is what you should have done for yourself all along, not to depend on USAID. When you get to education just now, when we get to education just now in this conversation, it says that Liberia is not meeting its quota in terms of funding education and funding healthcare. Whereas countries like Botswana, they're exceeding expectations. They're pumping more money into healthcare and education than perhaps anything else. And you've already seen that infrastructure.
You're right. And River says pro question. It's significant. He said, do they have enough representation? I want to tell you something. River says, let me give you some examples of other countries that have unicameral. Sweden, New Zealand, Denmark, Finland. So don't think because it's just you see this smaller African country going to do anything. So you say because it's few. These countries they have millions of people, millions, way bigger than Liberia. Liberia can fit in there 2-3 times, and they can do it. The thing is it effective? Do you need to debate in the House and then go debate in the Senate again? Do we really need that? So so it's cliche, but it's a think out of the box. Let's re-examine the way we're doing things. Is it effective or is it just traditional? And are we going to continue on this path and do things the way they did it in J.J. Robert time, and we expect anything different?
Yes. So 69 members in Botswana. There are 69 members. The president is an ex-officio parliament. So the way the election is conducted is that people go out and elect members of the National Assembly. So they elect parliament. So the party with the most seats that wins simple majority. For example, if you have 31 seats, right, and that's simple majority, you win that election. And so that's the way it's conducted. So a simple majority of seats, the leader of that party or the coalition, in this case, in the 2024 election, Duma Gideon Boko party, his party, Boko's party, which was the UDC won more seats than all the other contesting parties. So they don't go by proportional representation, it's a simple majority, and therefore his party won the election. And but during the 2024 election, it was a massive rejection of the BDP that had been in power for 58 years. The BDP was soundly defeated. The BDP had been in power since 1966, and the people were really frustrated with the BDP, and hence, they deliver a momentous victory for the UDC. Presidential term in Botswana is 2 terms of 5 years. So after this term, Boko is eligible to run again, and after that, that's it. So he's term limited. So the president is term limited to 10 years. So after 2 terms, that is it. That wasn't the case before. It was only this was established by the second president, I believe, Kwet Masiri, established the term limit. He fought for the term limit, and they went through the parliament and had that passed in 1997. This is important. Why is it important? We in Liberia have not been able to pass significant changes to the Constitution since when? Since 1986, right? This is the same Constitution that's still going around. Even those who oppose Doe, that didn't want to see the earth that Doe walked on, they kept the same Constitution that Doe, that Doe government wrote. It's the same Constitution, never changed. So if you have a revolution, what does a revolution mean? A revolution means that things are not going to be the same anymore. So this Constitution of the Republic of Liberia should have been gone. But that's a different story. I'm just trying to juxtapose how things are in some of these other countries and how they are in Liberia. Term limit is every 5 years. So yeah, this why is this video? I like this video, the guys. So you see there, the guy in the red suit, red jacket, is Masiri. He was the incumbent president. This is in 2024 during that debate. And the guy to the opposite end of this, the opposite spectrum, in the nice, blue, dark blue suit, is Duma Gideon Boko, the young guy right there. He's one of the challengers. And the 2 guys in the middle are also, they're opposition candidates. And they really have debates, Dennis. We don't have debates like these where you have the incumbent standing alongside opponents. In fact, when they have some kind of forum in Liberia, I think it was Weah time, and Weah didn't participate. He's not participating in debate. So nobody knows. So we're electing people that we don't even know. They go out, they put out a few press releases, and that is it. And we're supposed to vote for them on the basis of either what they're telling us in church or the press releases that they're putting out, right? For George Weah, it was the pulpit. That was his campaign. That was his forum. And that is it. Or through music, through dancing. That was it. For Boakai, is just few statements, not much. And meanwhile, Mr. Boakai, he's not even talking to the local media. He usually, if you want to see how Boakai is effective in communicating, just watch him when he talks to the VOA or the BBC. And that's when he gives the most elaborate interviews. Not to his country's media, not to the local media, not to you, Dennis, not to Spoon, not to any place else. Whenever he went on Spoon, whatever, it was like, okay, I have to go. The president, president has to go. It's just a few minutes. It can't be a few minutes, Mr. President. You have to go before the Liberian people. There has to be a deliberate effort, where you have a meet the press kind of situation from the executive mansion, where the president is talking to the Liberian people through the media. We don't have that. You have to, I guess, LBS has to go around. I don't know what they do, right? I don't really know what they do, and our leaders continue to get away with it. In Botswana, so besides the executive, you have the judiciary, and this is an independent judiciary. You have, in contrast to ours, what you have in Botswana is the Court of Appeal, and this is the highest court in the country. It is the final arbiter of all legal matters. Then you have the High Court. The High Court is the equivalent of perhaps our Supreme Court. The Chief Justice, the High Court is headed by the Chief Justice, and it has, unlimited jurisdiction in all cases. But the Court of Appeal is powerful. It's the highest court in Botswana. And then, of course, you have other courts. You have the magistrate court, you have customary courts. And that's how the judiciary works. The president appoints the Chief Justice, but they're very independent.
Let's talk a little more about that Court of Appeal, meaning the Supreme Court or the High Court can come up with a ruling.
Yes.
You have a place for redress.
You have a place for redress. You go to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal can retain that, or they can strike it down.
And who's heading that?
It's the president. It's called the president judge, who's also the judge president or president judge, who's also appointed by the president. And the president consults with the Judicial Commission. So these appointments are not arbitrary. You don't just go to bed one morning and say, hey, I had a dream, and Dennis is the one that came in my dream, and he's the one I'm appointing. They actually consult with the Judicial Commission, and they put forth candidates. They recommend to the president who to appoint, and of course, it's prerogative of the president to appoint a candidate. But it's usually done in the middle. Is usually satisfactory to the Judicial Commission, which is why these people are very peaceful. Education or the economy first. Okay,
Yeah,
so
the
the economy of Botswana. So right there, you talk about the nominal GDP is the total output of the country, right? So the nominal GDP is $19.2 to $19.4 billion. You talk about massive economy. This is a large economy. The GDP per capita, which is per citizens now, is $6,900 to $7,000. Juxtapose that with Liberia. Liberia's nominal GDP is $5.17 billion, and the GDP per capita is $907. So an individual citizen in Botswana has, based on this analysis, Dennis, has more money in their pocket. They contribute more to the economy. So while we waste a lot of time, they're producing for the country. Hence, they have a high standard of living. They may have a higher cost of living, But that's all offset by, your productivity. Because you have more money in your pocket, you can spend more. And so the people in Botswana are wealthier. This is what this analysis shows. Wealthier than people in Liberia. Botswana is by far wealthier than Liberia. This is what this analysis shows. And a third of the Botswana's resources is from diamond. Discovered diamond in the 60s in the Kalahari Desert. The desert has been a lifeline for Botswana. Tourists go to that place they visit the Kalahari. And so they have a big, tourism industry in Botswana. The literacy rate, as I mentioned earlier, is 88.6%. At independence in 1966, there were 22 college graduates and 100 high school grads. That's it. Now, this country has 88%, about 90% literacy rate, because the government, once again, is making that effort and pumping in money into the educational system of Botswana. And so when you do these things, all of these things, and you support your healthcare system, you allow people to go to hospital when they're sick. You allow people, even in the rural areas, the forgotten places. We have a lot of forgotten places, not in Botswana, and you tend to see a lot of forgotten places. And this is not just unique to Liberia. Lots of West Africa, places that I have traveled at least, I see in West Africa spots, whether that's Sierra Leone or Guinea, these spots. You see spots of forgotten areas. You tend to think, is there a government? Does the state still work? Is there somebody still running this place? You go to a place and it's totally forgotten. Forgotten in the sense of there's no infrastructure, no clinic to speak of. There's nothing, light. You can't even don't even talk about light. Okay. You're not even talking about light. We're talking about, lanterns or something called, is it still jack-o'-lanterns, where you pour the kerosene in a little cup.
No, the oil or pancana oil in the cup. So by the time you get up, the dirt all in your nose. But you said something. Look at this statistic, right?
Yes.
At independence in 1966, there were 22 college graduates.
Yes.
And 100 high school graduates.
Yes.
And we'd like to juxtapose. Let's do the same thing. In 1917, we had our first PhD. We were the first African, the first Black African to graduate from Harvard.
Yes.
We had that 1917.
Wow. From Liberia.
From Liberia.
Wow.
We were.
Wow. 1917.
So I'm not talking about college graduates. We've long past that.
Yes.
We have Liberia College, long time already putting out graduates.
Mm-hmm.
But 1917, first PhD Black African to graduate from that institution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now, what is our literacy rate now?
Yeah, we're hovering around 40 to 50% literacy rate, right? So again, it all, the deliberate effort matters. So when you draw up your budget as a member of the House of Representatives, right, you have the power to fight for education. This all can be executive, because we're all driven to say, the executive didn't do this, the executive didn't do that. Of course, the executive drives the agenda. The executives have the bullet pulpit. But also these representatives they've elected to abdicate their responsibilities by not doing the thing that they're supposed to do, because they know at the end of the day, we're going to put all the blames on the executive branch of government, which is taking heat time and again. We put heat on the executive branch of government. And meanwhile, the legislature is let off the hook. scot-free. So something you brought up, Dennis, the healthcare in Botswana. So healthcare in Botswana is it's private, publicly funded. They have a strong publicly funded system. They have universal coverage for citizens of Botswana, extensive network of clinics and hospitals. So does this sound like the United States or some Western European country? Really? I mean, this is what this sounds like.
It's better than United States, in fact.
Better, right? Better. Extensive networks of clinics and hospitals. 95% of the population lives within 8 kilometers, 5 miles of the nearby healthcare facility. So I can walk if I feel a headache, I can walk to the nearby clinic. Some of the people in Kalipo say that? I don't know. I don't know. Can some people elsewhere say that? I don't know. They can't go because they don't have these facilities. So people sit and just pray and hope that it goes away, that problem, goes away. For instance, pregnant women in these villages, if you have to come to the nearby clinic, which is maybe you're crossing 2-3 creeks to come to the nearby clinic, Dennis, you know what that means? That's serious. And sometimes these issues can be fatal to the expected mother and the unborn child.
Yeah.
And so these are life and death issues in the part of Africa that we come from. Botswana has covered those bases. Something that's near and dear to our president, our beloved president, Mr. Boakai, is the rule of law. I mean, he talks about the rule of law, but I mean, is it the rule of law or the rule of one man? In Botswana is the real rule of law. Botswana maintains a strong commitment to the rule of law. It's enshrined in their constitution. The constitution.
We have the rule of law.
Yeah. Right.
If you get it, you are lucky.
Right. And Botswana protects human rights, maintains a separation of powers, right? They do that. They mean that. They do it and they mean it. No political prisoners. One of my metrics is, I look for, when I'm doing this research, I look for, is there a political prisoner in that country? And what did they do? Are they in jail for a good cause? Or, they're just in jail because the party in power feels that they were troublemakers and they were speaking for the right thing. I didn't find any of that in Botswana. I did not find a single person that was locked up because they said something that the president didn't like. And so, one of the things that Masisi got in trouble for was his attempt at authoritarianism. He went after his predecessor, Ian Khama. Ian Khama is the son of the first president, Sir Sherif Khama. After Ian Khama's presidency, I believe in, I forgot the year now, maybe 2017, 2018, I forgot what year that was. His successor was Masisi. So Masisi went after Ian Khama, and Ian Khama had to leave Botswana. I remember there was a forum, and I was part of, I got into this forum. These social media nowadays have really made the world a global village. Yeah. So this was some years ago, a couple of years ago or more. So people were talking about, Ian Kama did something, and so the president said something, Masisi said something, and I wrote something in that chat and said, but this is harassment. This is unjustified, something like that. And there was a lot of, Masisi supporters that came after me, talking about, what Ian Kama was doing and he didn't do. And mind you, Ian Kama was, surfing the military. So it's Lieutenant General, something like that. Lieutenant General Ian Kama. So he's a patriot. He's a guy. He's the son of the first president. So I didn't, although I have to admit, I didn't know much of his presidency, but I was willing to go on the limb to defend defend him in my own little ways in that chat. But there was quite a few people, that responded to me in terms of supporting Masisi. But even with that response, I felt like Masisi was in trouble because this is not the culture of Botswana. Botswana has been peaceful. So to come in now and, go for authoritarianism, this is not going to go down well with the people of Botswana. And I think that the election justified what I was saying, a couple of years ago. And this is something I probably predicted, you know, some couple of years ago, that it'll be a problem for Masisi, but there were other issues for Masisi. It wasn't just attempt at authoritarianism. The diamond, the price of diamond on the world market has hit a low, slightly down, and so the government hasn't been able to fully diversify into other areas. Of course, you have cattle rearing and all these different things that they do, but not as equal to the diamond industry. The diamond industry is really giving them a lot of boosts, something that Jimmy mentioned. But they're not doing, the country, the challenge now for Botswana and for the new government, Gideon Boko, is to be able to diversify into other areas so that whenever you have an unforeseen problem with in the diamond industry, you have a place to go to. Tourism is one sector where they've heavily invested, and that's paying off. So they have to look at other areas, in order to sustain this economic growth. They're low taxes already. They've lowered taxes, so investors, are flocking into, Botswana, and they're doing other things. But you see that the country has a small population, just 2.5 million people. Then it's curious because this is a place that I really, from my research, I've done my research. I really liked it. In addition to what we've heard about Zambia, our colleague on here, talk a lot about Zambia. So it's interesting that it's a place again, that one has to put on that maybe we can put one has to put on their list to see if one of these days.
Yeah.
I have a lot of places on my list already. So I think I don't mind putting this on my list, Botswana. I like it. I really like it. And the research gave me a lot of appreciation for what's going on down there. And of course, I have some references for this, further readings for those who are interested. You can read these articles. There are a lot of articles out there on Botswana. And it's really a fascinating country. It's relatively young, but very fascinating as well.
Thank you. Let me announce that if you want to join the conversation, the number is on the screen: 605-313-6004. The code is 791-403#.
Yeah,
We're talking about Botswana, and so please call in and let's hear from you.
Real says, Pro said, hope they are immigrant friendly. Yes, I haven't heard anything about them. I haven't heard anything negative about how receptive they are. In fact, there was a podcaster that went from the States to Botswana, and he liked it. Everywhere he went, he was well received in Botswana. So I think that they're immigrant friendly.
And so we want to bring in but before we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be getting some calls.
From the shores of Monrovia to the world online, a voice rises higher, standing strong through time, telling stories of a people, lifting truth with pride, where the heartbeat of a nation has a home to shine. You give the voiceless power, you let the world all see the beauty and the struggle of our history. Through every debate, every story you tell, light up the darkness where silence once fell. Focus on Liberia, let the truth be our guide. A bridge for every Liberian, at home and worldwide. You carry us our stories, our hopes and our dreams, uniting a nation through your powerful streams. Focus on Liberia, forever we stand, with knowledge, with courage, rebuilding our land. In the diaspora cities where our people roam, you connect every voice to the place we call home. From politics to culture, every truth you unfold, keeping Liberians informed, empowered and bold. You're the drumbeat of freedom, the echo of peace, the fire that reminds us our pride never ceases. And through every challenge, you rise up again, a guardian of wisdom with the heart of a friend. Focus on Liberia, let the truth be our guide. A bridge for every Liberian, at home and worldwide. You carry our story, our hopes and our dreams, uniting a nation.
Welcome back. This is Focus on Liberia. We have our first caller. River says Pro, you're live.
Hello?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, thank you for the show, man. It was great. Let me wait. After Madagascar, did you guys do another segment on another country, or is this the next one?
This is the next one.
Oh, okay. So, okay, I got two quick questions. Thank you, Professor Sherif. My first question has to do with I'm very proud of Botswana. Thanks to you guys for this piece of history. My first question has to do with universal health care. So I know you guys are not health professionals, but why is it that
don't be too sure.
Why is it a country like an unpopulated country like Botswana can be able to introduce universal health care, whereas we in the United States, it has become a struggle. You know, Obamacare, Trump said he would break the whole thing down, talking about you got a concept of it, and it gets been back and forth between Republican and why is it that difficult that an African country, I didn't even know they have universal health care, that they have it, but we are struggling in the West to even get it. Is there a lack of political, is it because of politics, or is it just a lack of will? That's my first question. And then my second question has to do with because Professor Sherif did not say much about Western influence or Western interference because I know they were not colonized by British, they were just a protectorate, like we were protectorate of the American colonization society. But you didn't say much about, they didn't, I mean, was there a British by Kennedy? How much did, I mean, what is Great Britain doing in over there? Because when you look at Ivory Coast, we got Ouattara, he's a French bad. The French people don't have problem when he go into a term, and Babu was more like a traditionalist. When you go to Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe was more like a traditional base, and then I think Tshisekedi, its rival was more like Western back. So what I mean, is there any Western British influence in the country when it comes to election or when it comes to the political effect? That's my second question. Thank you for having me, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Sherif, you got your questions?
Okay. All right. So the first question regarding opposition to universal health care in the States. I work in this sector. I am currently working in the public health sector as a someone who determines a supervisor who is responsible for determining eligibility for public public health assistance called Medicaid and Medicare. We also work with Medicare recipients. So I know a lot about this, and I've also followed the policy on these different programs. And this is a profound question. One of the reasons why there's so much opposition to universal health care has to do with ideology, political ideology. So you have a lot of elements of the, not just the conservative, not even most of the conservative base, but you have French elements who are very powerful, who have consistently opposed universal health care. You have healthcare. You have for example, why would a state like West Virginia, for example, why would states like that oppose the application of universal health care? Why would these people oppose that? Why would Kentucky oppose anything like that? But you have these issues. They are wedge issues, and sometimes the messenger is crucified more than the message. So if Obama says, you need universal health care, well, it must have come from a Democrat who is considered a communist. No, this is a communist system. We're not going to do this. We're going to push against this. Without going into a lot of the, because I have to be very careful. I work in the sector, the governmental sector of it. I'm not in the private sector. But I have seen, for example, once upon a time, I saw someone who, visited, one of our offices, and this person was a Tea Party supporter, wanting, medical assistance. And so, this is so incongruent. You're out here opposing this system, and you're out here wanting this benefit. So yeah, I want to be careful around that subject because I can't talk more about that. There of course privacy issues and all these different things. But yes, it's a matter of ideology. The push back. Sometimes you sit there and say, but this doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
And one reason also is behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have universal healthcare, it putting somebody out of business, the insurance companies.
Yes.
And these are the people that write those laws.
Right.
These are the people that are paying. Those are the lobbyists.
Right.
So they're not, if you're in a group, it's like, even though you go to getting a real estate, you can get a house. It's like they're in a group. It's like the same person who is selling the drug is the same person who's at the hospital. It's the same person who, So you're not going to do anything that's going to undercut your benefit.
Yeah.
Basically, that is.
It's a lot of you're right. It's a lot of lobbying against universal health care, and I don't understand. I don't understand. You make it compulsory for us to have car insurance. Your vehicle must have a minimum insurance, right? Minimum liability insurance, but you have people walking around with no insurance, and yet you have elements who are of the conservative thought political side of things, saying, well, this is if I'm made to do this, this is dictatorship, this is communism. No communism, but it's the same people who go around and wanting these same benefits somehow, some way. It doesn't make any sense. All I can say is that, and I agree with you, Dennis, their powerful interests are pushing against these things. To his second question regarding British interference into Botswana politics, early in the 1960s, when Sherif Khama won election as the first president, I mentioned that Sherif Khama was even expelled. I think he was exiled from Botswana because he married a white woman. One of the things was, that was disallowed. This was a taboo, and he was one of the early Africans, of that era to, intermarry, and then because this was disallowed, he got in trouble, and he had to leave Botswana for that reason, and in a way, he was disrobed of his, royal heritage because he came from royalty, and so the pragmatist that he was, made no qualms of that. He returned to Botswana, knowing that his royal heritage he's been disrobed of that, and so he didn't make any qualms. So in a way, I mentioned earlier, he was agreeable to the British. Otherwise, he would not have been president, I don't think, if he wasn't agreeable to the British. Botswana didn't have to fight for independence. And that's number one prerequisite for these colonial powers. Like, okay, they didn't fight for their independence. They're not out here killing us. So we're comfortable with them. So the Europeans, the British, if you will, were, satisfied with the British, that they can live with them. And Sherif Khama, when he took over, he did not put in place any sort of land redistribution like Mugabe, right? Mugabe went to work right away and said, I'm going to take all this land and give them to my militants, my fighters, the war heroes, the veterans. And he did that. And because he did that, a lot of British fled. A lot of Europeans, mostly British, fled Zimbabwe. And they fled with their money. So hard currency. That's why, at a certain time during the rule of Robert Mugabe, you had inflation. You had prices that went through the roof. The economy almost, collapsed in Zimbabwe under, in the last days of Robert Mugabe. So yes, if you will, Sherif Khama was agreeable to the British. The British looked at him. I think he was viewed as their man, and so he didn't have any problems during his rule. In fact, he wasn't. He was elected in 1966 and stayed on to 1980 when he died. And his vice president, Kwet Masiri, took over, and he instituted some reform, including the term limits. And so it's an excellent question.
Yeah. Thank you. We don't have any more callers, so let's wrap it up.
Yeah. So now what we're going to do in the coming month, for example, maybe we'll have one segment. I'm thinking maybe that's going to be on Namibia or some other democracy. You notice that what we've done, from the beginning, we have all these bad democracies that left bad tastes in our mouth, like, oh, Tanzania, this is such just nice people. And archaeological evidence says that the beginning of human civilization started in the Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. Now, there are other evidence that's coming up, you know, talking about Botswana. But there's more evidence, you know, that, you know, our origin, the human origin, is from Tanzania and somewhere in Tanzania. But when we did democracy in Africa and Tanzania, it was so bad because, you know, of the leader that's in power now, you know, where she was killing her people. The week of that program, you know, it was the week of death, for example, you know, killing people. You know, this woman, which Dennis couldn't couldn't grasp, you know, he couldn't see this woman, you know, who has this soft face, you know, nice, you know, she can talk. You know, it's like someone who can talk to you forever, but yet, you know, she's dangerous at the core. And she is the one.
Let's take our last caller. Let's
Okay.
go.
All right.
And that's your comrade, Kalewo Gonglo. Mr. Gonglo, you're live.
All right. Good show, good historical perspective. But I just want to, you know, just throw in one, maybe not correction basically, but maybe give maybe additional, just modify one information about Zimbabwe. You know, the Manchester Agreement between Mugabe or revolutionary movement and the British. In that agreement, they were going to pay the British farmers so they can willingly give up the land in Zimbabwe. But Mugabe spent more than 10 years in power without calling for the implementation of the Manchester Agreement. So when the British started to talk about democracy, you know, it was, I mean, the wave of multi-party democracy started swinging around Africa, and Mugabe came in limelight, and they started, you know, European Union started criticizing, the Commonwealth actually started to criticize. They said, oh, okay, we're going to implement the Manchester Agreement. You should have paid your farmers, so you owe them, we're going to redistribute this land. So he did not start it on the first year, he did not start it in his fifth year, he started only when they started to criticize him for committing all acts of, you know, all acts against his citizens, then he became angry. So I just want to throw that in there, okay? But on the Botswana thing, I also want to say there are two lessons we can learn from Botswana. That leadership is critical in every system. In as much as governance and the systems are very critical, but leadership is also important. In the United States, that is the epicenter of constitutional democracy. One person has actually stretched the constitutional rule in this country, President Donald Trump. Even things that people thought were not possible, I mean, that, okay, it was a tradition, like, say, a conflict of interest. I think it's not even probably clearly defined, because he had his children in the White House during his first term. And he was playing role. He said, listen, it's voluntary. You know, he didn't have to even give his business, put his business in a blind trust, because there's no law on that. It was just a tradition that previous president thought it was ethical, he was to do so. So I think leadership is also critical as much as the laws themselves. Our problem in Liberia is we've never had a visionary leader. So Liberian revolutionary rise or progressive thought, they quote the likes of Nkrumah, they're quoting Nelson Mandela, Julius Nyerere, you know, or Thomas Sankara. They are not quoting a visionary leader in Liberia. If you want to quote anybody, they're quoting about Paul, who was just an opposition, right? So our problems are multiple, and Liberians themselves are conflicted in this thing. Take for example, Mohamed was critical of we are so much that even when we are proposed a legitimate amendment to the 1986 Constitution. It was Mohamed and others that opposed it that we was trying to succeed himself. If they amend the constitution, then we will have a territory. I was always saying and say, the constitution, in as much as our constitution is very clear that whoever amends the constitution cannot benefit from the amendment, right? It's there. But opposition look at it and they say, okay, we can fool the population. And let's go against it, And amendment that would have gone through to shorten the term limit, the term of the president and the senator. Senator, 9 years. I was proposing us bring it to 6 years. The opposition opposed that. Had that passed, the election of 2023, senators who were elected would have just been 6 years. And the president would have gone 5 years. We are our own problem. That's why I call for military change in the country.
Thank you. Because thank you, sir.
Right. So let me address a point that Gonglo made regarding my opposition to Weir. I'm on video. The good thing is I'm on video regarding that particular reform that Weir put in place. That's one of the areas that I have really complimented Mr. Weir for pushing. I think you know that, Dennis. That's something that I feel like it should have happened like yesterday. I would like a 4-year term of office, right? 1 term, 2 terms, after 8 years, you're done. Why does the president have to sit there for 12 years? We don't need a 6-year term. Certainly for senators, they go there to die. People 9 years after 2 terms. That's the life of a child who was born today and graduated from high school, and the same person is still there. Prince Johnson, we saw that. How long was he there? Like 27 years or more? So this is the kind of thing, or maybe not, right? But he was there for a very long time. I think he went through 3 terms. He died in his 3rd term. The senators, and what are they doing? There's nothing much that they're doing. So for 9 years, you elect a senator that sits there. And in that first year, they're not really doing anything because you can't come after them, right? And then members of the House of Representatives, 6 years is too long for me. So when Weir did that, I actually complimented him. And I criticized the opposition, Cummings and others. Cummings to me, that's what I said, pick something and stand for it. Stand for something. Not all these things that you're doing. Why did he oppose that amendment? You're a member of the opposition. Do you want a better Liberia, or you want a Liberia like this? You're not going to change anything. He was the leader of the opposition at the time. And so he needed to do something, but he did not. And so that amendment failed. When it failed, nothing else came up after that. And so we're back to where we're at. In terms of Robert Mugabe, I think Mugabe's reform, I think largely Gonglo is right. I think I agree with him. But Mugabe, this was a plan. And the first part of that plan was, the early 80s, if you're a war veteran and you want to buy land. So, the whites were really being nudged to say, okay, at some point, look, do you want to sell your land? And then, it was called the willing seller and willing buyer, or whatever that was called at the time. So you want to sell your land? Okay, we're gonna have somebody to buy your land. And then the second phase of that project was the fast track, where he pushed those guys out. But yes, the response largely was because he was so heavily criticized. Because now, keep in mind, this was after the war in Matabidi land between him and Joshua Nkomo. And Joshua Nkomo, Mugabe killed a lot of supporters of Joshua Nkomo. And this was unfortunate, that people in Africa, you have, we can't coexist. You can't coexist with the opposition. And it was unfortunate that happened. Mugabe was criticized for it, and as a result, I mean, he fast track. He went to fast track, and the fast track was that we're going to take these people off of this land, and the land is going to go to veterans of our war of independence. In Botswana, you don't have any of that. So Botswana has really been spared all of the tensions. Even when South Africa will go and invade other countries, during the apartheid era, Botswana was largely spared. The Botswana Defense Force was established around the apartheid era in response to South African invasion of all these different neighboring countries, an attack on the neighboring countries. For the most part, Botswana was spared from that, from South African interference. Was spared from, has been up to this time spared from military coup d'etat and all the different things that will damage their democracy. And so it has been an enduring democracy. It's an admirable democracy. Again, I go back to, I agree with Gonglo for the most part on this also. Leadership. I go back to my car analogy. You love a good car. You love a reliable vehicle. You love a new car. But car by itself, the car cannot drive itself. I'm not talking about, latest technology. So you need a good driver. Who are the drivers in Liberia? We have people coming in, making promises, empty promises. And when they get behind the wheel, they don't mind throwing that car in the dish with everybody. The nation is the car. They don't mind throwing the nation in the dish. They don't mind throwing the Liberian state into the dish to line their own pockets. They don't mind throwing the Liberian nation into a dish, okay, to extend their own rules, to fatten the pockets of their family members and what have you. So, this is where we are, with Liberia. So every time you do this and you juxtapose, you see this big gap between Liberia and all these other different countries, as you've seen the economic performance of Botswana, which is, far exceeded Liberia's economic output.
Wonderful, wonderful, Mr. Sherif. Thank you so much. Yes, our viewers will always want to let you know that Focus on Liberia is the place to be. We cover almost everything, So please tune in every now and then to watch what we have. Check out Facebook and YouTube channel. Commissioner Sherif, your final words and where we go next.
Final word, as I said, we may likely do a segment perhaps on Namibia or one of the other democracies. But next month, I'd like to dedicate next month to African unity and all the different things and what went wrong with African unity in view of what has already transpired between Guinea and Liberia. What if we had a federal leadership in Africa, as Kwame Nkrumah have proposed? You have the United States of Africa. If you had the United States of Africa, you have a federal system of government where you have these states like Liberia, states like Guinea and Sierra Leone, where you have governors who are governing these states, who have their own legislatures and their own constitutions, but they are all subservient to this federal arrangement. So under this arrangement, you still have your independence. You still can do things in your own areas, but there's also this federal authority. So when I travel, for example, I go to Liberia and travel to Botswana. I don't need to, I don't need 10,000 immigration checkpoints to report. I don't need any of this stuff. All I need to do is just drive down there and I'm good. Like I can drive from here to Georgia. I can drive from here to California free, unless I violate something along the road, then of course, the police is going to react to that particular violation. That's how it is in the United States. So you go through the continental United States and nobody's going to stop you. But try going from Ganta to, to JK, this 5-mile stretch of land. And, you're going to have all these people stopping you at the checkpoints. We don't need that. We're held up, behind walls, behind checkpoints, artificial walls. Brothers and brothers, sisters and sisters are divided. Why is it that we're honoring colonial boundaries? Why do we have to honor colonial demarcations, the demarcations of the Europeans? They're coming in telling us that, your relative is not part of this other country. You are this citizen. You are a citizen of country A. She or he is a citizen of country B. What sense does all this make?
No,
He's my
absolutely.
uncle, and this is the same land. This is our ancestral land. So now you go to places like JK, you have families that are divided. You got people of the Maan ethnic group who are in Ganta, and their family members are across the bridge in Bala, which is Guinea. So they are called Guineans. The other family member is called Liberia. What sense does all this make? Same thing in Sierra Leone. Same thing in Cote d'Ivoire. Same thing all over Africa. What if we've broken down all these demarcations and allow Africa to be the land of liberty, the land of the true land of liberty, the true land of freedom, the true land of unity of the Black race, of those who, even if you're not Black, okay, you coming in, we've accommodated you to come in because we accommodated a lot of people. You got Europeans who are citizens in Africa. You have Asians who are citizens. Everybody is a citizen, some kind of citizen in Africa. This is not a hyperbole. This is not a tale. I'm not telling a tale. You go to South Africa, maybe at the airport, Dennis, you're a Black man, and at the airport, a European might be asking you for your passport and your entry visa. A European might say to you, "Oh, you can't enter my country. This is no. This is my country. I'm Black, and this is my country. You came here in the 1800s, 1900s. Okay, when my ancestors were here. Okay, but they can tell you at the South African, airport, a European can tell you, no, you can't enter here because you can't enter my country. You go to the north, it's the same. You got Arab, you got Tunisia. People in Tunisia. Blacks in Tunisia, it's like they have no rights. They're being clamped down. They're clamping down. The authorities in Tunisia are clamping down on Black people. Okay, and these are lands that belonged to Black people. They were driven out of these areas. Okay, and so that is the story of Africa. And Kwame Nkrumah understood these things. A great teacher. Sekou Touré understood these things. Modibo Keita understood these things. Okay, Ahmed Bembella, those guys, they understand these things. King Hassan of Morocco, this king, I think his grandfather or his father, they understood these things. That's the reason why they wanted a united Africa, an Africa where if you come from South Africa, you come from Namibia, it's the same. Wherever you go, you are in Africa. And I'll just say this in closing. Kwame Nkrumah, not Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré demonstrated this in Guinea. Every time an African left their homeland and went to Guinea, they were considered citizens of Guinea.
Right away.
Mariam Makeba was appointed by Sekou Touré as Guinea's ambassador to the United Nations. She was a South African, but she held Guinean passport. Sekou Touré gave Mariam Makeba a land, a house, a place to live, and she was declared a Guinean. Sekou Touré said all Black people are citizens of Guinea. Stokely Carmichael, the civil rights activist, lived in Guinea, I think, till his death. Sekou Touré declared him Guinean citizen. President Kwame Nkrumah, when he was overthrown, was declared a co-president, not vice president, a co-president of Guinea. Sekou Touré said, "You've been overthrown in Ghana. That is your country, is my country. Here also is my country and your country. So you're going to sit with me here. You and I are going to govern this country." And Kwame Nkrumah was appointed by Sekou Touré as co-president of Guinea. Sekou Touré didn't stop there. Sekou Touré declared that he is going to take Kwame Nkrumah back to Ghana and reinstate him, because the Guinean military was very powerful, and it still is. Under Sekou Touré built this infrastructure. So Sekou Touré put together a group of Guinean soldiers, Guinean fighter jets were being assembled to go into Accra and remove the military regime that overthrew Kwame Nkrumah. When news of that hit Ivory Coast, President Felix Houphouët-Boigny reacted to this. And Sekou Touré said to Felix Houphouët-Boigny that, "I am warning you, if you shoot down a Guinean," something I heard. I didn't read this anywhere, but something I heard one of the former ministers said, that it was, in short, it was Felix Houphouët-Boigny who opposed the movement of Guinean fighter jets over Ivorian territory. And in his own words, this I heard from Felix Houphouët-Boigny. He said, Sekou Touré called me and asked me to allow Kwame Nkrumah to return to Ghana. If Sekou Touré thinks that he's our boss, then he don't know what he's doing. And so, in short, he opposed it. He said in that meeting in Ivory Coast, in Abidjan, the president of Cote d'Ivoire said that our eternal enemy. He called Kwame Nkrumah the eternal enemy. His eternal enemy, the eternal enemy of Africa. That's what Felix Houphouët-Boigny described Kwame Nkrumah. So Kwame Nkrumah opposed this. But what I also heard or gather is that, the reason why the expedition...
We have a minute to close.
Right. The reason why the expedition, the military adventure, if you will, didn't go ahead is because Kwame Nkrumah finally told Sekou Touré that, no, if we have to return to Ghana to kill Ghanaians so that I can return to power, I don't want that. I don't want any blood to be spilled for me to return to power. What I would like to see, if the Ghanaian people need to rise, they themselves, if they want me back, they will rise, not for you here in Guinea to take me back in fighter jets and take me back to Accra. But the Ghanaians themselves must rise. And when they rise and get me back, I will go. I don't know how he felt like the Ghanaians were going to rise without killing. It was still going to be bloodshed. So I don't know. So he turned that down. But finally, he died in 1972. But had he not died in 1972 at the time that he passed away, I think that Guinea would have still done something to return Kwame Nkrumah to power in the same way Sekou Touré did Siaka Stevens. When Siaka Stevens was overthrown, Sekou Touré took him back to Guinea, to Sierra Leone, to Freetown, and reinstall him as president of the Republic of Sierra Leone. So, you know, in short, I'm just saying, to wrap this up, is that, you know, people like that understood that we, Africa, you know, we're not different. You know, there's no Sierra Leone, there's no Liberia, there's no Cote d'Ivoire. This is the same continent, the same land. So, you know, I wish that dream had been fulfilled, that we didn't have people like Tupman who opposed this, people like Julius Nyerere who opposed, you know, the immediate African unification. There were other groups, you know, the Togolese president, the Nigerian prime minister. They were all part of the Monrovia group that vociferously opposed Kwame Nkrumah's bid to unite Africa around the United States of Africa.
Thank you. On that note, we're going to close with a song that says, "We are all Liberians." Thank you. Good night and God bless.
Thank you.
We are Liberians.